In the vast emptiness of space, far beyond the familiar stars of the known galaxy, a tiny research station floated silently. It was barely more than a cluster of interconnected modules, each one glowing dimly under the light of distant suns. The scientists and technicians aboard were used to quiet, routine days filled with scanning the cosmos, charting unvisited star systems, and analyzing strange cosmic phenomena. Life on the edge of the Orion Spur was often monotonous, but it had a strange, almost hypnotic beauty. The endless black sky, dotted with stars and nebulae, was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. For months, the station had transmitted nothing unusual, and its inhabitants had grown accustomed to the peaceful monotony of monitoring distant worlds and cosmic radiation patterns. Then, one ordinary day, everything changed. A faint signal appeared on the station's long-range scanners. At first it was almost imperceptible, barely registering on the instruments designed to detect even the slightest fluctuations in space-time or radio waves. Lieutenant Mara Singh, one of the station's senior communications officers, was the first to notice it. The signal was irregular, a pattern that didn't match any known natural phenomenon or previously catalogued alien transmission. It wasn't like the simple pulses of a distant star or the predictable bursts from a pulsar. It seemed deliberate. Someone or something was trying to communicate. At first, the team assumed it might be interference or a glitch in the equipment. They ran checks on the station's arrays, recalibrated the sensors, and even rebooted the entire communications module. But no matter what they did, the signal persisted, faint but undeniably there. Over the next few hours, the station's small crew worked tirelessly, analyzing the waves, trying to find a pattern, trying to decode the mysterious message. The signal didn't match any known galactic language, nor did it use familiar mathematical encoding methods used by the Galactic Council. It was entirely alien, unlike anything humanity or any other species had encountered before. As the day turned into night, and the station orbited its lonely star, the tension grew. The scientists, normally calm and composed, found themselves whispering in hushed tones, exchanging anxious glances. The discovery of an alien transmission, especially one that seemed deliberate, was the kind of event that could change the course of human history. But what made this signal different, what made it truly unsettling, was its content. Through hours of painstaking analysis and pattern recognition, the crew managed to partially decode the message. What they found was nothing short of horrifying. The transmission was a distress signal, not a simple helpless message, but a vivid, desperate plea for survival. It described cities engulfed in flames, skies choked with toxic smoke, and the anguished cries of a population facing annihilation. The alien beings who sent it were clearly intelligent, but they were completely unprepared for the threat they faced. The words painted a picture of chaos and fear so intense that the station crew felt a shiver run down their spines. The species calling for help, whom they later identified as the Illyrians, had civilizations crumbling around them. Their technology, though advanced in some ways, was clearly no match for whatever force had come to destroy them. The Galactic Council, the governing body that oversaw interstellar relations and coordinated responses to such signals, was immediately alerted. When the transmission was forwarded to them, the reaction was mixed. Many council members viewed the plea with skepticism or fear. The Illyrians' distress was genuine, but the council worried about the risks. The location of the planet was in an uncharted region filled with hostile species and unknown cosmic hazards. Responding to the SOS could mean facing a powerful, unidentified threat that might endanger entire fleets. Some member species even suggested ignoring the message, reasoning that their own worlds should take priority. The politics of interstellar survival were harsh, and not everyone believed it was worth risking their lives for a civilization they had never met. Yet humanity reacted differently. Humans, known across the galaxy for their adaptability, courage, and at times recklessness, saw the SOS not as a risk but as a moral imperative. On Earth and throughout the human-controlled regions of space, there was immediate action. The Rapid Response Fleet, a highly specialized unit trained for extreme conditions and unknown combat scenarios, was activated without hesitation. Admiral Lydia Reyes, who commanded the fleet, was briefed on the situation. Unlike many other species, she didn't pause to calculate political repercussions or potential losses. Her orders were simple: go, save them. Meanwhile, back on the research station, the Illyrians' distress continued to unfold on the decoded messages. Their society had been forced into a corner by an enemy whose strength and brutality were unlike anything that humans or anyone else had seen. Entire cities had been destroyed in a matter of hours. Natural landscapes had been scarred by weapons of unimaginable power. The Illyrians described their hopelessness with raw emotion, showing a civilization at the brink of extinction. The more the humans studied the messages, the clearer it became that inaction was not an option. The planet itself might not survive much longer. The journey to the SOS's origin was not simple. The coordinates pointed to a region of space that few human scouts had ever visited. The path was filled with dangerous asteroid fields, gravitational anomalies, and potential encounters with hostile species. Yet, the humans prepared quickly and efficiently. Every ship in the fleet was checked, weapons systems calibrated, medical bays stocked, and support teams briefed. Even in the face of the unknown, there was a sense of determination among the crews. They knew they were heading toward danger, but the idea of arriving too late to save an entire species was unacceptable. As the human fleet began its journey, the crew of the research station watched with a mixture of hope and awe. For the first time, they've realized the true power of humanity not in technology, nor in strategy alone, but in courage and moral conviction. While the Galactic Council hesitated, humans acted. They set a course toward the unknown, prepared to face threats that no one could predict, simply because they could not ignore a cry for help. The Illyrians' SOS had done something that no ordinary transmission ever could. It had inspired an entire fleet to risk everything for the sake of life itself. In those quiet moments aboard the station, as the human fleet disappeared into the void, the scientists could only imagine what awaited them. Would the humans arrive in time? Would they even be able to reach the Illyrians before it was too late? The signal had opened a window into a universe filled with both unimaginable danger and extraordinary courage. For the Illyrians, it was the last thread of hope, and for the humans, it was the beginning of a mission that would forever change the way the galaxy saw them, not just as fighters, but as saviors who answered when others would not. The journey toward that SOS was just beginning, but already it had shown something extraordinary. In a galaxy full of civilizations that calculated risks and measured rewards, humans acted differently. They did not calculate, they did not hesitate, and they did not question the morality of helping those in need. They simply answered. The human fleet moved through the black expanse of space with a quiet determination that only those trained for danger could possess. Every star, every nebula they passed, was noted and analyzed, but no obstacle could slow them. Admiral Lydia Reyes maintained constant communication with the fleet's commanders, ensuring each ship knew its position, its objectives, and the critical importance of the mission. Unlike other civilizations, humans did not hesitate before a challenge, and this was no ordinary task. The Illyrians' SOS had led them to a planet under siege, a world teetering on the brink of total annihilation as the fleet approached the system. Long-range scans revealed horrifying evidence of the destruction taking place. Cities were reduced to rubble, forests burned to ash, and smoke could be seen even from orbit. The attacking species, known as the Kreth, had established a relentless foothold on the planet. Their forces were organized, aggressive, and extremely well. Entire populations had been displaced, and the Illyrians who remained were trapped in fortified zones that were barely holding against constant attacks. The human fleet paused just outside the planet's atmosphere, conducting detailed scans to identify enemy positions, civilian concentrations, and potential landing zones. Every human commander understood the stakes. One mistake could cost thousands of lives. Commander Avery Cole, an experienced officer with decades of combat experience on human frontier worlds, led the initial ground forces. She was known for her ability to assess complex battlefields and make lightning-fast decisions under extreme pressure. From her command ship, she observed the planet through high-resolution imaging arrays, noting the chaos below. The Illyrians, delicate beings with fragile builds, were huddled in their sanctuary city, their eyes wide with fear as explosions rocked the horizon. Their technology, though clever, was clearly insufficient to repel the Kreth forces. They had shields, yes, but they could barely withstand a few concentrated attacks before failing. Their weapons were advanced for defense, but lacked the destructive power to strike back effectively. Despite the overwhelming danger, the humans prepared to descend. Dropships were readied, full of soldiers, medical teams, and emergency supplies. Their mission was twofold: protect the Illyrians from immediate threat, and neutralize as much of the Kreth forces as possible to give them a chance to survive. The dropships shuttled soldiers into low orbit, and the soundless, tense moments before landing stretched on as if time itself had slowed. Avery Cole gave the final orders: move fast, strike hard, and keep the Illyrians safe. Nothing else matters. Her voice, calm yet commanding, echoed through the comm systems, giving everyone the clarity and focus needed for what was about to happen. When the dropships entered the planet's atmosphere, the full scale of the devastation became even clearer. Fires raged across the landscape, smoke and ash choked the sky, and the screams of the few survivors who dared to move through the ruins were haunting. The Kreth forces were waiting. Alien drones swarmed the skies, launching attacks on anything that moved. Automated turrets fired relentlessly, seeking to destroy any human intruders before they could land. Yet the humans pressed forward, shields glowing as they descended, energy weapons firing in controlled bursts to neutralize threats without harming the Illyrians below. The Illyrians watched from their shattered city with a mix of fear and awe. They had never seen a species fight like this before. Humans moved with precision, but there was a ferocity in their advance that seemed almost reckless. They did not hesitate or retreat in the face of overwhelming odds. Buildings that had once provided cover for the Kreth were torn down with calculated strikes, and enemy drones were destroyed in midair with bursts of concentrated fire. Each move seemed risky, yet it was executed with perfect timing. To the Illyrians, humans were like forces of nature, unstoppable, relentless, and terrifyingly efficient. On the ground, Commander Cole led her forces through the burning streets. Soldiers advanced in tight formations, covering each other as they navigated the ruins. Human engineers worked quickly, setting up mobile shields and energy barriers to protect the Illyrians who were trapped in the open. The sound of alien weaponry clashing with human defenses filled the city, creating a chaotic symphony of war. Medical teams moved alongside the soldiers, treating injuries with speed and precision. Human discipline and training allowed them to operate as a single coordinated organism, even under constant enemy fire. The Kreth were ruthless and adaptive. They attacked in waves, sending heavily armored walkers through the streets and swarming the humans with agile infantry units. Each wave seemed more dangerous than the last, yet the humans responded with strategies that no other species had used before. They exploited weaknesses in the Kreth formations, drew enemy units into ambushes, and used the city's ruined architecture to their advantage. Small squads moved ahead of the main force to secure key locations, while artillery units fired from afar, dismantling enemy structures. The Illyrians watched with growing hope. For the first time, they believed someone might actually save them. Even as they fought, the humans remained focused on their primary mission, protecting the Illyrians. Civilians were guided to safer areas, evacuated from collapsing structures, and shielded from indiscriminate attacks. Humans carried the wounded on stretchers, using portable shields to block enemy fire. They moved as if their own lives were secondary, driven by the belief that no one would be left behind. This was something the Illyrians had never seen: an alien species willing to risk everything, not for power or conquest, but simply to save another civilization. Night fell on the ruined city, and the chaos did not diminish. The Kreth launched a coordinated attack under the cover of darkness, attempting to overwhelm the human forces. Explosions lit up the horizon, shadows danced across burning buildings, and the Illyrians trembled in the streets. Yet the humans adapted. They deployed night vision equipment, used heat signatures to track the enemy, and coordinated their response with a precision that seemed almost impossible. Commander Cole led a counterattack that pushed the Kreth back, regaining lost ground and securing key defensive positions. Each human action was a calculated risk, balancing aggression with the need to protect civilians. Through it all, the Illyrians observed the humans not just as warriors but as protectors. They saw courage in the face of terror, determination in the midst of chaos, and an unyielding moral strength that no calculation or political debate could match. They began to understand that these humans were different from any other species they had encountered or heard of. They did not hesitate, they did not question, and they did not falter even when the odds were overwhelmingly against them. By the end of the first engagement, the human forces had secured a temporary safe zone within the Illyrian city. Fire still burned in the distance, and enemy forces remained a threat, but the immediate danger to the trapped civilians had been mitigated. The Illyrians, exhausted, injured, and traumatized, gathered together in the human-controlled zones. Their gratitude was evident, though many could barely speak through tears. Humans, in their quiet way, acknowledged the thanks but focused on the work still ahead, protecting as many lives as possible, and preparing for the next wave of attacks. For the human commanders, this was only the beginning. They knew the Kreth would regroup, that the battles ahead would be even more dangerous, and that their mission was far from over. But they also understood something crucial. The Illyrians had hope now, and in war, hope could be a weapon as powerful as any gun. The humans had arrived when no one else dared to, and that act alone was changing the course of the planet's future. As the night stretched on, the city settled into a tense quiet, broken only by distant explosions and the occasional cry of a wounded civilian. The Illyrians, watching the humans patrol their streets, realized that for the first time, they were not alone. In the darkness, in the chaos, and in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity had arrived. They were fierce, fearless, and determined, and the Illyrians understood that these aliens were unlike any help they had ever received or expected to. Arrived, the first contact had been under fire, under the threat of death, yet it had also been a revelation. The humans had not only landed, they had brought with them the courage, the skill, and the relentless determination that would define their role in the battle to come. The Illyrians whispered among themselves, speaking of the strange, powerful beings who had come when no one else would, and who had faced impossible odds simply to save them. And far above, in the blackness of space, the human fleet waited, ready to continue the mission that had begun with a single, desperate SOS. The fight had begun, but so had a bond that would endure. Humans and Illyrians, strangers from different worlds, now shared a purpose: survival. And in that moment, amidst fire, smoke, and chaos, it was clear that humanity had answered the SOS in a way no one else could or would. The Illyrians had survived the initial chaos, but their world was still far from safe. Even after the first wave of attacks, the Kreth were relentless, their hunger for destruction unyielding. From their temporary stronghold within the city, the humans began organizing a more permanent defense. Commander Avery Cole and her officers worked tirelessly, mapping the ruined streets, identifying choke points, and positioning defensive units where they could hold off the enemy most effectively. Every wall, every collapsed building, every alleyway was studied and used as part of the strategy. Humans were methodical, yet unpredictable. They moved quickly, striking where the enemy least expected, but always keeping the civilians, the Illyrians, at the heart of every decision. The Illyrians, fragile and gentle by nature, had never seen such organized combat. To them, the humans seemed almost like mythical beings. They were not just soldiers. They were protectors, builders, medics, and strategists all at once. Mobile shield generators appeared within minutes, creating barriers that could withstand blasts that would have leveled entire Illyrian cities. Engineers adapted the humans' technology to the ruins of the city, transforming broken streets into defensible fortresses. Civilians, previously terrified and helpless, were guided into safety by human teams who moved among them like guardians. Every human acted as if their life had no value compared to the lives of those they were protecting. As night fell, the Kreth launched a more coordinated attack. They had regrouped, and the new approach was more sophisticated, aiming to break the human perimeter. Giant walking machines, bristling with weaponry, stomped through the streets, while swarms of aerial drones cut through the smoke and shadows above. The Illyrians trembled in fear, hiding in basements and ruins, yet they could see the humans moving calmly through the chaos. Human squads split into smaller units, each one assigned a specific task. Some focused on disabling enemy machinery, others engaged in close combat to protect civilians, and yet others coordinated long-range strikes to halt reinforcements from entering the city. Despite the chaos, the humans' coordination was flawless. Avery Cole directed operations like a master conductor, issuing commands that allowed her units to anticipate and counter Kreth attacks with almost uncanny precision. Their tactics were aggressive, daring, and unlike anything the Illyrians had seen. Humans did not simply react, they adapted, improvising in ways that seemed almost impossible. A human medic risked her life to pull injured Illyrians from a collapsing building, covering them with her body as enemy fire tore through the street. Another squad of soldiers used collapsing ruins to create traps for the Krethwalkers, turning destruction into an advantage. Every action was calculated, yet executed with the instinct of someone who had survived countless battles. The Illyrians began to whisper among themselves, amazed by what they saw. They had sent out a desperate SOS, never imagining that help would arrive in the form of such fearless, determined beings. Humans moved as one entity, but each individual seemed to radiate courage and determination that inspired even the terrified aliens. The sight of humans standing unflinchingly against impossible odds gave the Illyrians a sense of hope they had never felt before. They realized that survival was possible, not because the humans had superior technology alone, but because of something deeper, an unbreakable will to protect, to fight, and to save those who could not save themselves. As the battle continued, humans also worked to repair critical Illyrian infrastructure. Communication arrays were restored so the surviving Illyrians could contact each other, and power generators were reactivated to bring light to the darkened streets. Engineers modified human shield technology to cover entire neighborhoods, creating safe zones where civilians could gather. Medical teams worked tirelessly, treating injuries and preventing the spread of disease. To the Illyrians, it was nothing short of miraculous. In the middle of war, humans were able to rebuild, protect, and carol at the same time. The Kreth, however, were adaptive and persistent. They tried multiple strategies to break the human line. One wave used psychological warfare, broadcasting terrifying holograms meant to frighten the Illyrians into surrender. Another wave focused on precision attacks to isolate and eliminate human squads. But humans anticipated these moves. Avery Cole had trained her officers to think like the enemy while protecting the innocents, predicting patterns and countering attacks before the Kreth could fully execute them. When enemy drones attempted to swarm a street, humans set up decoys and ambushes, turning the attackers' aggression into their own downfall. Hours stretched into days, and the humans never faltered. They rotated squads to prevent exhaustion, rationed supplies efficiently, and continuously adapted their tactics to the evolving battlefield. For the Illyrians, each day was a lesson in courage. They observed how humans faced fear without hesitation, how they could endure injuries, exhaustion, and loss, yet continue to fight and protect others. It was a strength that no Illyrian had ever seen in any species. They began to understand why humans were feared and respected across the galaxy. It was not just because of their technology or weapons. It was because of their relentless spirit, their refusal to give up, and their unshakable moral core. By the third day, the humans had established a secure perimeter around the Illyrian sanctuary. The Kreth, frustrated by their repeated failures, began to retreat temporarily, regrouping for another attack. The Illyrians emerged from hiding, cautiously at first, to see the humans patrolling the streets. They witnessed squads repairing defenses, distributing food, and comforting frightened civilians. The sight filled them with awe. For the first time, they believed they might survive. They saw that humans were not invaders or conquerors. They were guardians, willing to risk everything for the helpless. Amidst the ongoing battle, a deeper bond began to form. Illyrian children began following human medics and engineers, learning to help and assist in small ways. Adults started cooperating with soldiers, providing guidance about the city's terrain and the behavior of the Kreth forces. There was a sense of mutual respect and trust growing amidst the chaos. Humans taught the Illyrians how to reinforce their shelters, how to move safely during attacks, and how to communicate effectively under pressure. The Illyrians had never experienced this level of organized protection and support. They were learning that survival in this galaxy required not just fear or caution but courage, strategy, and a willingness to fight together. The human forces also began to understand the Illyrians' resilience. Despite their fragile appearance, the Illyrians displayed determination and intelligence. They had a deep knowledge of their city and the surrounding terrain, which the humans used to strengthen their defensive positions. Engineers worked alongside local Illyrians to modify structures for protection, while scouts learned to navigate hidden routes and provide early warnings of enemy movement. It was a partnership born out of necessity, yet it fostered respect and admiration on both sides. As days turned into a week, the Illyrians began to believe in the possibility of survival. The humans' presence was more than just a military advantage, it was a symbol of hope. Even when the Kreth launched night raids, humans remained vigilant, adapting their strategies and maintaining the safety of their wards. Avery Cole and her officers worked tirelessly, coordinating operations that balanced offense and defense, protecting civilians while weakening the enemy. Every human soldier, medic, engineer, and officer played a role, demonstrating a unity and purpose that inspired the Illyrians beyond words. The human forces had turned a devastated city into a stronghold capable of withstanding further attacks. Fires still smoldered in distant blocks, and smoke filled parts of the air. But the immediate threat to the Illyrians had been significantly reduced. Civilians could move with relative safety. Medics could treat the injured without constant fear, and the first signs of rebuilding had begun. The Kreth were forced to acknowledge that their enemy was not just powerful, but unpredictable and relentless. The humans had shown that they would not falter, even when faced with overwhelming odds. The Illyrians, observing the humans in action, could not hide their amazement. These beings from another world had arrived when no one else dared. They fought, protected, healed, and rebuilt, all at once, without hesitation. The Illyrians began to whisper among themselves about these incredible visitors, speculating about their origins, their abilities, and the strength of their spirit. They realized that in this galaxy, survival was not merely a matter of technology or numbers. It required courage, adaptability, and a willingness to stand firm when everything else seemed lost. In the quiet moments between attacks, when humans patrolled the streets and Illyrians tended to the wounded, there was a shared understanding. The humans were here to protect, not to conquer. Their mission was clear: safeguard life, regardless of the cost. For the Illyrians, this understanding brought relief and hope. They had sent out a desperate SOS, never expecting anyone to respond. And yet here were these extraordinary beings, fighting not for glory or reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The Illyrians began to see the humans not just as soldiers, but as heroes. Their actions went beyond conventional warfare. They embodied a principle that few civilizations truly understood. The humans had made a stand that day, not only defending a species on the brink of extinction but demonstrating to the galaxy what it meant to act without hesitation when faced with injustice. And for the first time in a long time, the Illyrians believed in survival not just for their species, but for the possibility of hope in a galaxy filled with darkness. *E. Battle for the Illyrian city had reached a tense stalemate. For days, the human forces had protected the survivors, repelled attack after attack, and transformed the shattered urban landscape into a defensible fortress. Yet the Kreth were not finished. From distant positions on the outskirts of the city and from orbiting command vessels, they coordinated a new strategy. Their attacks had become more organized, more relentless, and their weapons even more deadly. They had realized that the humans were unlike any enemy they had faced before, reckless perhaps in their courage, but brilliant in strategy. Humans had disrupted every attempt the Kreth made to take control of the city, and now, the Kreth were preparing their most dangerous assault yet. From her command ship hovering above the city, Admiral Lydia Reyes watched the unfolding situation carefully. She had spent days monitoring the battlefield, analyzing enemy movement patterns, and assessing weaknesses in the Kreth formations. Now, she saw the true opportunity for a decisive strike. The Kreth's central command ship, a massive vessel that coordinated their forces and controlled their drones, was positioned behind the planet's moon. If it could be destroyed, the remaining Kreth forces would lose cohesion and the humans could finally gain the upper hand. Reyes called a fleet-wide meeting, her voice calm and commanding, yet edged with intensity. Every captain and officer understood the importance of the mission. Failure was not an option. The Illyrians lived, and the survival of their species depended on it. On the ground, Commander Avery Cole prepared her squads for the next phase of battle. Human soldiers were already trained for the impossible, but what lay ahead was beyond anything they had previously faced. The Kreth command ship was heavily defended, surrounded by swarms of drones, automated turrets, and smaller support vessels that could strike at ground targets with precision. Avery knew that a direct assault would be deadly. Yet she also knew that hesitation would allow the Kreth to regroup and launch even more devastating attacks on the elite. The humans had no choice but to act, and they would act with the same relentless courage that had brought them this far. As the fleet moved into position, human fighters launched from orbiting ships, weaving through enemy fire with incredible agility. The sky above the planet was filled with streaks of light as energy beams cut through the darkness. Explosions shook the atmosphere, and debris rained down from destroyed drones. Human pilots worked in seamless coordination, anticipating enemy movements, exploiting weak points in Kreth defenses, and drawing attention away from the Illyrians below. Their aerial tactics were daring, unpredictable, and terrifyingly effective. The Kreth, who had assumed total control of the battlefield, found themselves constantly outmaneuvered, unable to predict the humans' next move. Meanwhile, on the ground, squads of soldiers advanced toward the locations identified as crucial to the success of the mission. They moved with a combination of precision and daring, clearing paths for engineers and demolitions experts who would disable the Kreth's communication jammers. These jammers prevented the human forces from targeting the command ship effectively. The ground teams faced intense resistance, with Kreth walkers and infantry attacking relentlessly. Each battle was brutal, close quarters, and dangerous. Yet the humans pressed forward, driven by the knowledge that every minute they delayed could cost the Illyrians their lives. The Illyrians watched from behind reinforced shields, barely daring to move. Their eyes followed the humans as they darted across the streets, climbing over debris, and engaging in combat with fearless determination. The humans' willingness to risk themselves in ways the Illyrians could not even imagine inspired hope. Children clung to their parents, whispering prayers and marveling at the strange, extraordinary beings who had arrived to save them. For the first time in days, they believed that survival was possible. Back in orbit, Admiral Reyes coordinated the final assault on the Kreth command ship. It required a combination of precise timing, coordinated attacks, and sheer human daring. One of the destroyers, a heavily armored vessel equipped with experimental weapons, would execute a direct ramming maneuver to disable the command ship's core. It was a tactic no other species would attempt, considered far too risky. Yet for humans, risk was secondary to necessity. The crew of the destroyer prepared themselves, fully aware that their actions could end in total destruction. They accepted it without hesitation, motivated by the lives depending on their success. As the destroyer accelerated toward the Kreth command ship, human fighters provided cover, engaging enemy vessels and drawing fire away from the fragile vessel, making the critical run. Explosions lit the void, debris floated through space like deadly meteors, and the tension aboard every human ship was almost unbearable. Then, at the perfect moment, the destroyer struck. The impact tore through the Kreth command ship, causing massive internal explosions that crippled its systems. Communication arrays went dark, control over drones and forces was lost, and chaos spread through the remaining enemy lines. The Kreth forces, once organized and coordinated, became scattered, panicked, and directionless. On the planet below, the effect was immediate. The Kreth attacks faltered, walkers stopped advancing, drones crashed from the sky, and the remaining infantry units were confused and disorganized. Humans on the ground seized the moment, pushing forward to reclaim key positions, evacuate civilians from danger zones, and neutralize the remaining enemy pockets. The tide of the battle had turned, and it was clear to both humans and Illyrians that victory, though hard, was within reach. The Illyrians emerged cautiously from hiding, witnessing the humans' extraordinary coordination and relentless courage. They saw soldiers carrying wounded through streets still under fire, engineers restoring vital energy shields, and medics tending to the injured with incredible speed. It was a display of skill, discipline, and bravery unlike anything they had ever encountered. For them, it was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a revelation. They understood that these humans, strangers from a distant world, had arrived not to conquer, but to protect. As the battle drew to its climax, human forces worked seamlessly between ground, air, and orbital units. The combined assault had destroyed the Kreth's command structure, and the remaining enemy forces were either captured or neutralized. Human medics moved through the battlefield, treating both Illyrian and enemy survivors alike, demonstrating a level of moral discipline that further amazed the observing aliens. The Illyrians, exhausted and terrified just days before, now felt a sense of security they had never experienced. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, humans turned to rebuilding and securing the city. Structures were reinforced, fires extinguished, and energy shields expanded to protect the survivors from any remaining danger. The Illyrians, though still shaken, began to regain hope for the first time in their lives. Children played in small, safe areas, families began to reunite, and communities slowly started to reorganize under the guidance of human engineers and leaders. Humans had not only defended them, they had given them a chance to live, to recover, and to imagine a future again. The Kreth, recognizing their defeat, retreated into the shadows, leaving behind a planet that was scarred, but no longer under immediate threat. From orbit, Admiral Reyes observed the aftermath of the battle. She knew the victory was significant, but she also understood that the Illyrians' recovery would be a long process. Still, humanity had demonstrated what it meant to act decisively, courageously, and with moral conviction. They had turned a desperate SOS into a mission of salvation, showing that the right action was more powerful than any weapon or strategy. As the humans began to stabilize the planet, the Illyrians finally had the chance to express their gratitude. Words were inadequate to describe what they had witnessed and experienced. They had seen courage in its purest form, skill in battle unmatched by any force they had encountered, and moral discipline that inspired awe. To the Illyrians, humans were no longer just strangers. They were saviors, protectors, and heroes. They had not only defended a species but had set that standard for what it meant to answer a call for help without hesitation or fear. The first moments of calm allowed humans and Illyrians to begin working together more closely. Humans trained the Illyrians in basic defensive strategies, showed them how to maintain protective shields, and shared methods for early warning systems. For the first time, the Illyrians felt capable of defending themselves under human guidance. The partnership between the two species, forged in fire and battle, had begun to solidify into trust and mutual respect. Even as the day ended, the humans remained vigilant. Patrols continued, medics were stationed strategically, and engineers monitored the remaining hazards. Every member of the human force understood that the battle was only one part of the mission. Their true objective was the survival and recovery of the elite. They would not rest until the planet was secure and the people were safe. And in the eyes of the Illyrians, every human action was an extraordinary display of courage, dedication, and the kind of bravery that seemed almost impossible to imagine. The Illyrians had experienced something that would remain in their history forever. They had witnessed a species that acted decisively, fought fearlessly, and protected the helpless with unwavering determination. The Kreth were defeated, for now, but more importantly, the humans had shown what it meant to answer a call for help in the truest sense. The Illyrians understood that their survival was not only a result of skillful combat but of a profound moral courage that few civilizations could ever match. The battle had ended, but the aftermath was only beginning. This city, once a thriving hub of Illyrian civilization, lay in ruins. Streets were cracked and littered with debris, buildings smoldered from fires, and the air still carried the acrid smell of smoke and destruction. Yet amidst this devastation, hope had taken root. Humans had arrived when no one else would, fought with unmatched courage, and ensured that the Illyrians were alive to see the dawn of a new day. The survivors, shaken and exhausted, emerged slowly from hiding, their eyes wide with disbelief and relief. They had been saved. And it was all because of the humans. Commander Avery Cole moved through the streets with a sense of calm urgency. Even though the enemy had been defeated, her work was far from over. She organized teams to assess the structural integrity of buildings, ensure that survivors had shelter, and establish secure zones throughout the city. Engineers began installing temporary support structures, reinforcing walls and rooftops to prevent further collapse. They worked tirelessly, understanding that every moment counted. Even though the battle had ended, there were still dangers: unstable buildings, unexploded Kreth devices, and areas that could collapse without warning. Humans approached each task with methodical efficiency, ensuring the safety of the Illyrians while planning for longer-term recovery. Medical teams moved among the survivors, treating injuries, preventing infections, and comforting those traumatized by the violence they had endured. Humans were trained for combat, but their compassion was equally formidable. They worked side by side with the Illyrians, demonstrating techniques for wound care, hygiene, and emergency response. They treated not only physical wounds but emotional ones as well, helping the survivors find a sense of safety and stability. Children who had been terrified during the battle were given attention and reassurance, and parents were shown how to protect and care for their families in the weeks to come. The Illyrians watched in amazement. They had never encountered a species that could combine lethal effectiveness in combat with such care and dedication to protecting life. Humans had not only fought for their survival but continued to work tirelessly afterward to ensure that every life was preserved. For the Illyrians, this was almost unimaginable. They had sent out a desperate SOS, never expecting such extraordinary beings to answer. And yet, here were the humans, guiding, protecting, and rebuilding as if the planet itself were their own home in the skies above. The human fleet remained on patrol, ensuring that no remnants of the Kreth forces could return to strike again. Satellites and sensors monitored every corner of the planet, ready to alert the humans to any new threat. Orbital engineers began repairing communication arrays, allowing the Illyrians to reconnect with each other and with any allies they still had. From space, the city that had once seemed hopelessly lost began to resemble something more like a home again. Human ships and technology worked in harmony with the Illyrians' own systems, creating a sense of stability and order that the aliens had never experienced. The rebuilding process was slow but deliberate. Humans trained Illyrian engineers and builders, showing them how to reinforce structures and repair vital infrastructure. They demonstrated the use of human technology, teaching techniques that could withstand future attacks. Water purification systems were restored, power grids were repaired, and protective energy shields were expanded to cover residential zones. The Illyrians, eager to learn and participate, began to see a way forward. They were no longer helpless. Under human guidance, they could take an active role in their own recovery. Food distribution became another critical focus. The Kreth had destroyed much of the Illyrian supply, leaving civilians hungry and weak. Humans organized rationing, set up secure supply lines, and ensured that every survivor received adequate nourishment. They coordinated with Illyrian farmers and engineers to salvage crops and plant new ones, establishing a sustainable food source for the future. Every action was carried out with care and precision, showing the Illyrians that survival required not only bravery but also foresight and planning. Amidst the rebuilding, the Illyrians began to express their gratitude. Words could not fully capture their feelings, so they turned to gestures and ceremonies. Small groups of Illyrians would follow the humans, offering gifts of flowers, handmade trinkets, and expressions of respect. Children drew pictures of the humans fighting and protecting them, which were displayed in temporary shelters. Every act of gratitude was met with humility. The humans did not seek praise or reward. Their purpose had always been clear: to protect, to save, and to ensure that life endured, regardless of recognition. In private moments, the Illyrians spoke among themselves about the extraordinary courage and moral strength of the humans. They described the soldiers who had carried injured civilians through fire and smoke, the medics who had treated wounds under enemy fire, and the engineers who had rebuilt the city even as drones attacked from the sky. For the Illyrians, these humans were not merely warriors, they were heroes in every sense of the word. Their actions had set a standard for what it meant to answer a call for help in a galaxy where fear and hesitation often dominated decisions. Humans also worked to address the psychological scars left by the battle. Many Illyrians had witnessed horrors they could not forget, and some struggled to cope with the trauma of losing friends, family, and their homes. Human medics and counselors provided emotional support, guiding survivors through grief and fear. They taught techniques to manage anxiety, fear, and stress, ensuring that the Illyrians could rebuild not only their city but also their sense of safety and well-being. Slowly, the alien population began to regain confidence, feeling that they could face the future with the humans' support. The collaboration between humans and Illyrians grew stronger as the weeks passed. They worked side by side, learning from each other and sharing knowledge. Illyrian leaders began to participate actively in rebuilding efforts, taking charge of projects and implementing the techniques taught by humans. In many ways, the humans were not just protectors, they had become teachers, guiding the Illyrians to a level of self-sufficiency they had never imagined. The bond forged in the fires of battle was now strengthened by cooperation and mutual respect. Admiral Reyes and Commander Cole oversaw the final stages of stabilization. They ensured that every neighborhood had protection, that essential services were restored, and that no survivors remained trapped or unaccounted for. They coordinated with orbital forces to establish permanent monitoring systems, ensuring that any future threats could be detected immediately. The Illyrians, watching the humans' careful planning and tireless work, began to understand the extraordinary discipline and foresight that made humans such formidable allies. Finally, the Illyrians formally acknowledged the humans' sacrifice and bravery. In a ceremony held in what remained of the central plaza, the Illyrians honored the human fleet and ground forces. They spoke of the courage, determination, and moral strength that had saved their species from extinction. For many Illyrians, it was an emotional moment unlike any they had experienced. Tears were shed, songs were sung, and promises were made to remember the humans' actions forever. Children watched wide-eyed as their parents spoke of the incredible beings who had come from the stars to save them. In private, the humans accepted the Illyrians' gratitude with quiet humility. They had not fought for praise, reward, or recognition. Their mission had always been clear: to save lives, protect the vulnerable, and act decisively when others could not or would not. For them, the success was in the survival of the Illyrians and the hope restored, and in the bonds formed between two very different species. Their actions had demonstrated what it meant to answer a desperate SOS with courage, skill, and moral conviction. Even as reconstruction continued, humans remained vigilant. Patrols were maintained, monitoring stations staffed, and early warning systems tested. There was no assumption that the Kreth would remain passive forever. But the Illyrians now had allies they could trust, allies whose courage and skill were unmatched. The humans had shown them not only the power of technology and tactics but also the strength of determination, moral courage, and the will to protect life at all costs. In the weeks that followed, the Illyrians began to rebuild their society. Markets reopened, schools were restored, and families began to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Humans continued to assist, but they also taught the Illyrians to take initiative, to defend themselves, and to rebuild with independence and resilience. A partnership had been formed, one built not just on survival but on trust, mutual respect, and shared experience. As humans prepared to leave, having ensured that the Illyrians could continue without immediate assistance, the aliens expressed their eternal gratitude. They bestowed upon the humans a title that would echo through their history: Eternal Guardians. It was a name that carried both honor and deep emotion. a recognition of the extraordinary courage, compassion, and skill that had saved their species. For the humans, it was a quiet acknowledgement of a job well done. They had answered the call when no one else would, and in doing so, they had changed the course of an entire civilization and the galaxy beyond. News of humanity's actions began to spread. Other species, long accustomed to fear and hesitation, watched in awe as the story of the SOS and the human response reached them. They realized that humans acted differently from other civilizations. They did not calculate risk or wait for political advantage. When faced with a cry for help, they acted. They fought with courage, protected the helpless, and restored hope where there had been none. Humanity had set a new standard, not through conquest or domination, but through bravery, skill, and moral conviction. And so, the Illyrians survived, rebuilt, and remembered. Their society, forever changed by the actions of humans, now had a story to pass down through generations. A story of courage, of guardianship, and of a species that had answered when others would not. For the humans, the mission was complete, but the legacy endured. They had saved a world, protected a species, and demonstrated what it truly meant to answer a desperate SOS in the darkest of times.